Welcome, my friends. This is another episode of John Webster Film, and this is a big one. And we're going to be talking about The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, and I have a absolutely wonderful special guest today. It is Ashaya from History of Westeros, as I'm sure you all know. And yeah, we're both huge fans of this show and The Dark Crystal at large. And I've been wanting to do a stream about this show for a really long time. So thank you all for coming. Ashaya, why don't you start off? I'm sure everybody knows you, but why don't you introduce yourself and talk a bit about your love of the Dark Crystal?
Yeah, I'm Ashaya. I do History of Westeros podcast, which is also on YouTube. We cover A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. And you could see a connection there with Age of Resistance, for one. I mean, I was a big fan of Dark Crystal before that, but I really feel like you can see the inspiration from Game of Thrones in Age of Resistance, in the different clans, in the in-depth history and all that. So I got a real kick out of the series for really adding a lot of depth to the world building.
Yeah, So sorry, guys. Let me know if you hear an echo, because I just realized in all my excitement I left my headphones over there. But yeah, I have to say, Dark Crystal is a movie that I've always admired quite a bit, especially just because of the puppetry and all the old school special effects and everything. But I'll be honest, it's not a movie that I would say I loved growing up. But that said, when I heard that there was a new Netflix series coming out, I was really excited because it's a very interesting world and there's a lot of potential to really dig in deep. And then once I started seeing all the previews and stuff, I got really interested and I just fell in love with the series completely. And as I'm sure, a lot of people in here will tell you, because I've been bugging a lot of them about watching it. Not all of them have been happy about that.
They'll be happy about it once they watch the whole thing, I think. But yeah, no, I have been a fan of the Dark Crystal since I was pretty young. I don't remember when I first watched it, though. It was just kind of always around in my household. I think of three movies in particular, and you can put Willow on there as well, but I think of three movies in particular: Labyrinth, The Dark Crystal, and Return to Oz, as being kind of this trilogy. Even though Return to Oz, it doesn't have the production crew in the same, but it does have some of the same puppeteers, of being these weird dark 80s movies that we just happened to have on VHS when I was a kid. And so I saw them when I would have been very young and impressionable, but I saw Return to Oz first, and I know that for a fact. And nothing is creepier than that. You can watch The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth and nothing compares to Return to Oz in terms of traumatizing a young child. So
yeah, I'd have to say that's probably one of the defining things I remember about The Dark Crystal as a kid, was that I was absolutely, I don't think I knew what they were called Skeksis, but I just remember the really scary looking things from The Dark Crystal.
Weird bird dinosaur looking things.
Yeah, and speaking of Return to Oz, yeah, that was another one that I remember watching that as a kid and just thinking, okay, this is not the Wizard of Oz that I know.
That movie got me to read all of the books, the Wizard of Oz books. I was like, this can't be the truth, is it? And well, it was a lot more accurate to the series than the movie, The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, my best girlfriend and I, we used to put on the movie and we would together make the chanting, the sounds, kind of moaning of the mystics, be like, oh, like we would try to harmonize and see how long we could get it to go. We'd watch it at least once a year, I'd say.
God, that's great. Yeah, and I have to say that even though I didn't count myself as a huge fan of the movie, it is a movie that I've bought on multiple formats just because it's such a beautiful film to look at, and the artistry behind it is so magnificent. So yeah, I bought every remastered version leading up to the they released a 4K version a couple of years ago, and I got that, and it's just beautiful to watch. But
yeah, you know, the Dark Crystal kind of ruined me for the Muppets as a kid, by the way. Because, like, I didn't understand that the Muppet Show was actually pretty adult because they look so childish. You know, they're so simplistic. So when, as a young kid or even a young teenager, you compare it to the Dark Crystal, you're like, this is kiddie stuff. And I just, now as an adult, going back to it, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is funny stuff. But I love puppets, basically.
Yeah, that's one of the stumbling blocks that I've discovered with recommending the show is that you come up against people who just can't get past the puppets.
Yeah.
I won't name any names, but they know who they are.
I mean, the puppets are one of the best parts of Star Wars, for example. Yeah. Those physical effects stand the test of time so much better than visual effects, than special effects in so many ways. And you can just see that in the Dark Crystal and in Star Wars.
Yeah, that's the thing, is because now you can take this series and you put it side by side with the original film, and they stand, you know, very well together because the effects, you know, remain, you know, they're using the same techniques, and that's the thing. The CGI will always age eventually. And,
yeah.
And puppetry it's just beautiful. And I mean, obviously they stepped up their game now with this one because techniques have gotten better. And, you know, one thing I'll definitely want to mention, especially later on, is if you compare the original film to the series, what they're able to do with the camera work and all that, it's amazing, because the original has, you know, it's a lot of static shots because, you know, was a lot of work to get, you know, the puppets to move as they wanted to, and so they weren't going to be doing an epic, you know, camera shots. But the fact that they're able to achieve that on this show is amazing, and
yeah,
it has made it really fun and exciting to watch.
Yeah, and that is visual effects, special effects, and action. A lot of that, which is that they're able to get rid of things like strings or things that allow you to see people, so they can use it to just slightly augment things, which I think is great. Or, you know, when making a rock puppet, which looks lore, you know, which looks nigh on impossible to make a puppet of that. But again, with special effects, they were able to make it work, which, I mean, I think one of my, like, I was not worried about the series at all, but it was in the first episode that I really was like, okay, I'm sold, completely sold, was when the Skeksis were all eating together. And it, like, the directing during that, the camera work, the editing is so off kilter and so fast paced, and it just moves between all of the Skeksis. And yeah, Louis Leterrier really, I mean, he directed every episode, as I'm sure you're aware. And I just, I can't believe what he did with this.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't think that I would have, and this is a little unfair because I'm not really familiar with his other work, but knowing him just from The Incredible Hulk, which is not like one of the best of the, you know, Marvel films necessarily. So I don't know if that name, I wasn't like expecting bad things, but I certainly wasn't expecting the tour de force that this show is. And what he was able to do with it is just incredible. And, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, he's the guy in charge, but the technical work from top to bottom with all the crew, and it's easy. I think it's easy for me to, when I'm talking about the characters, talk about the voice actors, but really they'd be nothing without the puppeteers.
Yeah.
They're just, the work that they did in this is,
I mean, the amount of things they managed to communicate, feeling and all that, while also being loaded into those suits, and it's just the strength of doing that. Like when you look into the physical nature and then that they're able to emote, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's because when you think of puppetry, you do think of, someone's like using their arm underneath something. But if you look at the behind the scenes documentary and you see the puppeteers who work the Skeksis and the fact that they're pretty much under this giant, sorry, I'm struggling to find the words. It's incredible all the weight that they have to bear to actually maneuver in those things.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Makes me, I mean, I gotta wonder, one, how hot it gets in those things and how much better they're able to take care of them. Because, I mean, think about in the 80s, that would have been very rough. Similarly, comparing in Star Wars, the kind of thing that Chewbacca had back in the 80s, 70s, right? Where they just put ice packs on him. Whereas these days he has like a whole filtered suit, right? That cools him off. So I wonder if some of these guys have some relief. I would be miserable. I could just that confined space, like your face covered. I can barely wear a mask.
I know, it's funny. I was just talking the other day to somebody when I went to, because I had to go back into work. And so I was wearing just, one of those face masks and some gloves. And I'm like, this is so uncomfortable. And then I'm thinking, and then something like this where, where you're having to put all this stuff on, it's got to be, the heat has to be absolutely unbearable. But yeah, so there's so many places with the series that we could really begin. Just from like a character point of view, I guess let me start with the most sort of classic of Dark Crystal characters, which is the Chamberlain.
Oh,
and I have to say, in addition to the puppeteering, but the voice performance by Simon Pegg, my hat's off to him, because this is a really iconic character and he managed to capture Chamberlain exactly.
Yeah, and no moment I was like, this is Simon Pegg. He was just Chamberlain, yeah.
And of course he's got his classic and
I was just talking in the chat about how I have a special ringtone that Brian Eidolon made me, which is he does a great Skeksis specifically Chamberlain voice, and so he did a ringtone, or he going, Ashaya, pick up the phone, Ashaya.
Pick it up for Fred. I've heard that.
Yeah, so I get to listen to Chamberlain when I actually have my phone not on vibrate, which is rare, but still is always surprising to me. Iconic voice. I will say I got one of my friends, Zach from Game of Owns. I got him to watch the Dark Crystal eventually with me for the first time. And immediately, as soon as it was over, he was going, He just had to do it. He just had to. And still, now he'll randomly just quote that one sound.
That makes me so happy to know that Zach is into this, and because I think I was listening to the podcast you guested on. He hadn't watched it at that point, right?
The series, he hadn't yet seen Age of Resistance. And then when I was there, we watched the first 2 episodes. He's kind of slow rolling it. He loved the movie, but he hadn't seen the movie until probably 2-3 years ago when he was at my house, and I was like, let's watch a weird thing.
That's nice that he enjoyed the movie that much, because I did wonder if it was something that it's easier to give yourself over to if you see it as a kid, because I think you're a bit more willing to give yourself over. But actually, that makes me happy to hear that he only saw it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think he's a little predisposed to liking weird things.
Mm-hmm.
So like he's not, he's a little bit of an outlier, but still, I think it holds up for people.
Yeah, Chamberlain is kind of the little finger of the show, Anna.
Yes.
It's weird because, I mean, I do realize that maybe I'll give a little sort of background on what the show is about after, but let's finish talking about the Chamberlain a little bit first, because he is so devious and he's really enjoyable to watch to the point that you kind of root for him at times, but he's doing these horrible, despicable things.
Well, sometimes other Skeksis are doing maybe worse things than he's doing, for one. Two, it's interesting because he isn't as successful in the movie, and he's a little more, bumbling, I feel like, whereas they gave him a little more skill here, which I think is interesting. It makes me like him a little. I want to see someone be a little capable, Chamberlain have some skill, and you can really see how devious he is and how he manipulates, general to emperor to like people that very powerful.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most incredible scenes in the show is when he's in the carriage with Rian in episode 5. Because it's just like, you start to say, well, the argument he's using is kind of sound from his point of view, and you can see Rian almost wondering if he should take him up on his deal. And it's evil and twisted what he's proposing. So you're just like, oh, don't listen to him. But yeah, so let's step back.
Is he your favorite Skeksis though, real quick?
Yeah, he's got
okay.
Yeah, just because he's funny, he's twisted, and yeah, it's because you kind of root for him because he's always it seems like he's always on the outs with the other Skeksis fighting to get his position back. So
yeah,
you need to root for him.
Yeah, he just keeps betraying people. He makes enemies and all that. Here, I'll show you my favorite Skeksis up to the camera. You can see.
Oh, well, okay. I had my mind on
I gotta mention the heretic, Skekgra.
Okay, yeah, because
Aha! Yes, and you can see my shirt right now is the Wanderer, aka the Heretic's counterpart, which
I got him right here too.
As of course, yeah, they're my favorite. They were such a good surprise to me when you hit that episode. That's my favorite episode, is the one where they, the magic of puppetry, and they go into that. But just a wonderful surprise, and we'll talk about them more later. But 100% now my favorite Skeksis.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people haven't finished the show in the chat, but you know what? We are just going to be talking about, stuff that'll spoil you. So sorry, but you get to episode 7 and these guys just pop up and you're not expecting like a loony, hilarious, good Skeksis.
Yeah, they were. I don't know if you ever saw how they were referred to by the writers and whatnot as being basically Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Skeksis mystic form, and that one's on uppers, the other's on downers. So they're tapping into Thra through copious amounts of drugs. That's straight from the writers.
Well, yeah, it's the whole thing with them does feel like a drug trip.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, once they start, it's like, I still don't know what to think of their surprise for the Gelflings, which is, their own little opera. It's like all this stuff is going on there and taking out a moment to just sing this absolutely dreadful opera that they've composed.
Deet loved it, though.
Yeah.
Speaking of Deet, right here, I just have to scare everyone in the chat. Ah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I've gotten so excited just about talking that I completely missed out on the fact that I brought visual aids today,
Oh.
because so that people get an idea of the characters that we're talking about. So, you just saw Deet's face, and here is Deet right here. So you guys,
Yeah. Look at
and
her.
she's just so adorable. And I apologize if Erin has showed up, because she did not want to see, as she calls them, creepy puppets. So, but
I've got a Deet too, and a Hup to go with her. But no, I love
I've got a whole bunch. I just didn't think I should bring files.
piles and piles. Oh, but yes, there's my distraction there. But no, go on.
But yeah, and Deet is voiced by Nathalie Emmanuel, who we know as Missandei from Game of Thrones, and I love her. She's just so sweet and adorable.
Yeah, she brings this innocence and curiosity to the role. I think just a very, her voice work in it just is very good. It's I mean, we see her as Missandei, so we can hear how she is doing something different, basically. Whereas I will say, like, Madra Farah, Lena Headey was just very similar to her normal voice. So I was less impressed with her performance. But otherwise, the voice work in general, I like a lot of them you don't even recognize, like Awkwafina doing her voice as a Skeksis. Some of them they did a really good job of giving like a Skeksis twist to it, to things.
Yeah, and of course, the heretic is voiced by what's his name? Andy Samberg.
Yeah, he's one though that I'm like, that's Andy Samberg. You can just hear it so clearly.
And yeah, Erin, you don't get to skip out and miss my visual aid. So here's the heretic. And he's crazy.
I mean, just look at him. It's ridiculous. Just a ridiculous man. I saw someone mention that Chamberlain was their favorite. Anna said Chamberlain was her favorite until the hunter showed up. That Skeksis was crazy, she said. And yes, that was shocking.
God, man.
Oh. Terrifying, honestly. Like, I was never really scared by the Skeksis as a kid, but that Skeksis has me scared as an adult.
Yeah, just, I mean, the whole scene, I mean, like the thunder and lightning helps the atmosphere. It's when he's hunting down Rian and Rian's father, and it's, which, by the way, is, you want a testament to the show being able to convey emotion through its puppets, that relationship, and the climax of that scene, when you get that between father and son, it's just, I cried.
Yeah. Sad stuff for sure. Oh, for sure.
So let me step back for a second and just give, kind of a quick overview of what the story is, because it's a prequel to the original movie. And in the original movie, you have the evil Skeksis, and the Gelfling race has pretty much all but been eradicated. And except for, you have two central characters in that film who are basically descendants of survivors. But the series takes place before that. There's lots of Gelflings, and they actually serve the Skeksis, and as the Skeksis are held to be these benevolent lords, apparently, which it's like, can't you take a look at them and realize something's not right?
Thank you. I mean, I know the Gelfling are all about all creatures are beautiful, man. But I mean, you can look at them and they're evil. You just tell.
But then it sort of goes with the idea that
Yeah.
the Skeksis have been around for so long, and it's just sort of tradition and what everybody knows. So regardless of their outward appearance, they know that the Skeksis are their lords and protectors, and so that's how they proceed.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a real world allegory.
Yeah.
Like, slam dunk, if you watch it, you're like, there's a lot there.
Yeah, maybe not as much of a stretch as it might have been a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah. True.
But yeah. Don't judge a book by its cover except the Skeksis. Exactly. And actually, Stephen, I'm glad you bring up trine, because you might know better than me. How exactly long is a trine?
It's unclear how long, like how you would translate it, because I mean, think about the suns and how you like when they have multiple suns. So like, what do you count? It's fantasy, basically. Yeah. I don't think we can say a trine is just a year, nor can we say a year matters, because if Gelfling and Skeksis and other things age differently, then why would they? Yeah, it's fantasy. Yeah, Here Be Dragon says a conjunction of the three suns, but I don't think it's not a conjunction of the three suns. There are conjunctions don't happen, that often. They have many trine between conjunctions. Anyway,
and
I imagine it has something to do with seasons, like in terms of, growing stuff. And that's my best guess, is that, whenever they're able to harvest and plant and all that, helps define it.
Yeah, and in regards to your question, Stephen, as far as how long before, I mean, I take it that it's, I mean, what do we think? It's maybe a couple decades in between the series and the film. I mean, if we were counting by traditional years, it's not really specified. Oh, I can't hear you, Ashaya. I've lost your audio.
Oh, I muted myself because you were talking. Oops. Anyways, Bryce Killinger in the chat said that a trine is defined as roughly 1 Earth year in the YA novels, and I have those right in front of me, and I read them, but I forgot that. So thank you. By the way, those young adult novels are a great deal of the source material, the baseline that they set for the series. Definitely, like, characters in it or in the series and all that. So I think that's cool that they kind of had that written text among other written texts to use, because there's a lot of world building.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because I've got all the 4 YA books and they've been sitting on my shelf, but it's like, I feel like I've got endless books I'm trying to get through. I really want to read them, and hopefully I will soon. I find it really interesting, the sort of adaptation process of this, because from what I gather, it's telling the same overall story, but that there's differences, and also the focal point of characters is different in the books. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the books, it's covering those kind of ancillary characters like Naya and Gurjin and Tavra, Annika, Kyle, and characters that were surrounding, orbiting, like characters that we see, obviously that Grian and Brea and Celadon, but Tavra was not a feature in it. Which an example is that in the books we learn that Tavra and Annika is Natalie Dormer's character. They were girlfriends. They were dating. And in the show, there's maybe a little like hint of that kind of thing. Like you get a vibe from them, but it's not at all apparent. So they didn't include that. But in a season 2, it seems like the kind of thing that they could incorporate. So I think there's a lot of things about each character that they can use to depict that character going forward. But a lot of it is just stuff that's already passed, so that we are like, oh, so that's what Gurjin was up to during this time period.
And it's funny because I remember, and by the way, here's Naya, then who is the central character of the books.
Yeah, we don't get much of her at all in the TV series. At all.
It's interesting because when I first watched the show, I didn't realize that the books kind of paralleled the same story. And so it's funny that there's sections of the show where things happen off screen that don't concern the central characters of the show, which you kind of have to play catch up with a little bit in your head. But I remember initially I thought, well, that's kind of neat because they're not really holding your hand. Mm-hmm. There's stuff that happens off screen that you just don't see. So it involves you kind of, just going along with the story, but knowing that there's stuff about that to discover when I eventually read the books. I love that because it's just going to enrich the experience.
Yeah, and I know you also have a bunch of the I'll just hold them up. A bunch of these things, yeah, I know you have a bunch. I don't know how much you've read of them all.
I have this one right here.
The creation myths. That one's the most important because it actually gives you a lot of backstory. And that one is really cool for anyone who's not familiar with it. It's the Creation Myths book, and it covers a bunch of the backstory for how things got to the point that the Skeksis are there, to how they're ruling the Gelfling. And it's illustrated. It's comic, but it also has things like poems or, little other things. But what I'm getting at is that I as someone who loves A Song of Ice and Fire, it's the fact that the Dark Crystal now has such a deep lore and history that they're working out, is obviously very exciting to me to be able to read the history of Thra and to see a prequel and to have different books. It's just a real universe.
Beth, sure. You want me to do it now? No. It's about time and finding the time. I haven't been able to read through the Creation Myths book, but I have poured over all the art in there. And
okay. So you know about Ronep then?
Yes.
That was the biggest shock to me when I got that book. I was like, what? That's Agra has a son, you guys. She has a son, which is just very weird and surprising to me. And I remember that the screenwriters also said that, maybe in future seasons we would see a tiny bit of Ronep or something. So that's intriguing.
Yeah, I know that it seems like future seasons, they appear up in the air at this point because we haven't really heard anything. But I have my fingers crossed because they haven't said that they're not happening. So
yeah, I mean, they have the puppets and the costumes and everything. I feel like they'd be damn fools not to do another season. They spent so much money to build those puppets and to make those costumes and those sets. I feel like they'll do it eventually, but it's the kind of thing that has a long production process. They'll have to get the voice actors, but that's well into the future. They don't have to deal with that for a while. But given what's happening right now, it'll be more than a few years before we see another season. But we won't have to deal with characters aging, is what I'm saying. Really, is that they're not held back by, oh no, Rian and Brea and Deet are gonna look like they're 25 when they were 18 when we filmed it.
Yeah, Beth. Yeah, it's the Dark Crystal Creation Myths, and don't worry. Now that we have our wonderful Slack group, I will just go ahead and link it for you. When we're done with that, which is another thing I should mention. This is the first stream really that we're doing after after having created the Here Be Dragons Slack group, and so we're all kind of connected in a way that we haven't been before, which is great. So, and if we have any regulars in the chat who don't know about this yet, so we have a just absolutely wonderful group of people in the Slack. So if you want to join in, just go ahead and either send me a message or Steven Stark or Nessie, since we're all involved in that. But yeah, and so we it's set up the story, and the change happens in this sort of situation of the Gelfling serving the Skeksis throughout the first episode of the season, where the Skeksis discover that since they can't draw life from the crystal anymore, they decide to use the crystal to drain it from Gelfling. And unfortunately, the first victim of this is Rianne's girlfriend, and whose name is escaping me.
Mira.
And it's just horrifying because you watch the first episode and you think that this is going to be one of your mainstay characters. and she just dies in the most horrific way in the final minutes of the episode. And I know that Stephen remarked, we were having a conversation about the show, and he mentioned it being a show made for children. And I'm just thinking, it's so terrifying and scary.
Yeah, I don't know about made for children. Yeah, I don't know about that. I would be happy if a lot of kids ended up stumbling across this and watching it. But I don't think a ton of parents are going to have their kids watching it like of their own accord.
Yeah, it's just, there's some dark stuff. I mean, called the Dark Crystal, so go figure. But it gets really dark and scary throughout. But in a way, it would be good for kids to watch it, because I do think that sometimes, kids are sheltered over much, and parents tend to think that they can't handle things that maybe they can. And, I think we all survived growing up with this movie around.
Yeah. And I honestly, if a bunch of kids see a series, it might radicalize them, like, down with capitalism. Like, this is a terrible system. Why are all these Skeksis taking all of everything?
Yeah. I know in the documentary they mentioned it's one of the nice things about doing a series like this is that you can tackle important social issues of the day, and maybe the audience doesn't quite realize that they're getting that, or it doesn't feel overt because it's done in a fantasy setting and it's with puppets, and so you can really tackle those real world issues.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's more. I mean, I mentioned that one, but there's plenty of others that they're heading on. I mean, I said it before, but I mean, in addition to the world building, but there's just a lot of depth in the series emotionally and thematically.
So we talked for a minute about Dee. Let's talk about her adorable comrade in arms, Hup.
Hup. Love Hup. That was a fun character. Yeah, Hup and his spoon. It was fun to get a really featured podling character after in the movie we didn't get one. Hup was kind of my Fizz gig of the series, because in the movie I just loved Fizz gig so much. He was just kind of this comical thing. And Hup, we don't really get Fizz gigs in it. We see them, but they just aren't a thing. That would be kind of fan servicey. I recognize that. But similarly, Hup fills me with joy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I didn't think much of the podlings in the original movie, because
they're not huge.
Yeah,
either.
they're just there to kind of be cute, and they're kind of like the Muppet characters of the original. But Hup is so endearing, and and he wants to be a paladin, and he's got his spoon, like a sword, and just I love the way he wants to, he'll do anything to protect Dee. And every time he yells out like "Podling Justicia," and
yeah. Oh, this is a perfect time for me to mention. Do you know what the podling word for podling is? Because it's insane. It's, let me try to say this. Apopia, poiopedia, I lost it. Okay. Let me try again. Apopia, poia. It's so hard. It is incredibly long. I will put it in the chat so everyone can see. It's so hard to say. You can try. I'll let you try to say it too. And it translates as master gardens who live in bulging plants. So yeah, it'll be in the chat. So let's hear you try to say this, John. It's
God.
Like I said, I lost it about halfway through. I could make it.
Apopia poiopedia. I'm sorry. Yeah, I made it about halfway through.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. So there's my fun fact. It's my favorite Dark Crystal fun fact. I just need to learn how to say it perfectly.
Oh my god. Yeah, I feel like that language would just be a nightmare.
Speaking of languages, they've actually done a lot of language work for the series too. In terms of, because some of them they have written language like the Skeksis and all that, and they actually had linguists, working out, hey, what is realistic here? What can they do? What makes it look like, kind of. I can't even think of the word. But there's a certain. I don't want to call it this, but it's the best thing, like a sacred geometry, basically, of the Skeksis and the mystics in general. Like you can see it all over in the art, in the books, in the series. It just kind of has that nature to it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted something that captured that as well. Whereas the podlings are as who said it in the chat. Here Be Dragon. Steven said it kind of sounds Hawaiian, and they're exactly right. It does kind of. Oh yeah. And Bryce mentions that fun fact about how in the original version, that you have on the chat, that is such a crazy thing they tried to do, right? Can you imagine?
Well, actually, because I can see it when I watch the movie, because I can kind of see how they sort of wrote dialogue to fit in what the puppeteers had done. That said, as far as the series go, I would not have it be any other way than what it is. But yeah, that would be so weird. I've actually seen the original clips that show them speaking in the Skeksis language, and yeah, it is a bit loony. I can't remember if they were going to do subtitles or not. I don't think they were. I think you were just supposed to infer what was going on.
I wonder if has there ever been a movie or anything where they just spoke in a completely made up language, even with subtitles? Has that ever been a thing?
Like for the entire movie?
Yeah, for the entire movie, or at least a great deal of it. Most of it, half of it. I don't know. I can't think of anything. At least there's some TV shows where they have a great deal of it, but it's subtitled and it's a pretty small amount.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, and when it wasn't made up language, which just goes to show you that would not fly at all. But I do remember, of course, that with The Passion of the Christ, and Mel Gibson originally wanted just no subtitles for the entire movie. And so, if you didn't speak Aramaic, it was just, you were just going to have to tell based on what was going on, what they were probably saying. But yeah, as far as a made up language, I can't imagine. I mean, the fact that the test audiences, did not go for, for this one just goes to show you. I think it would have been kind of fun in a loony sort of way.
Yeah, did you see we got a couple of good comments in the chat too with some possible tiny examples there.
Yeah, I mean, with Chewie and R2, you have a little bit of that. But again, that's not the whole.
No.
Or even a chunk. It's just a couple characters. But
yeah, it's the closest I can think of for sure. I think that's a good example. Amy also mentioned that in A Million Ways to Die in the West, Seth MacFarlane ad-libbed a native language, which doesn't sound great. I gotta say, without any context, it sounds like that has to be pretty bad. But that's something. But still, nothing that's even close to a third of a movie.
Okay, I just realized I skipped over when we were talking about Chamberlain and some of the other Skeksis. I also want to talk about the scientist, because he's performed by Mark Hamill, who very nearly steals the show.
Yeah, he was very good. There's definitely, I mean, you could tell a certain Mark Hamill-ness in it. I felt, but no, I saw a bunch of the pictures previously before the series came out. They had cast photo, they had character photos. And so I was actually quite shocked when I can't even think of what they're called. Anyways, when they have his eye eaten out, basically, that was shocking, because you see that the normal picture we get of the scientist, he is not all messed up like that, and that was very gruesome. Talk about some of the scariest things in the whole series, all between the movies and the series. Just having your eye eaten out it's really dark.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I think it's the second episode. That's how it ends.
Yeah, it's like episode 1, young girl has her essence sucked out and is killed. Episode 2 or whatever it is, either way, soon, Skeksis has his eye drilled out by a pincer. I can't even think of peeper beetle, something like that.
That's it. Yeah. And by the way, this happens all because the Chamberlain weasels his way out of accepting the blame for Rian escaping the castle.
Yep, that Chamberlain.
And somehow he makes peace with the scientist after that. It's like he's responsible for him losing an eye, but he still seems to make friends. And
the scientist is interesting. He does so many terrible things, like with his mad experiments and all the creatures he has, locked up. And then he is a little nice and sweet to that one little creature he has. I mean, it doesn't make up for anything, but he has this sweetness in him, basically, this where he's a little bit kind, but he still has the creatures locked up. But the Grunax that he does stuff to is the saddest thing in the whole series to me. The whole series, the Grunax.
The story of the Grunax is so horribly sad, and just especially when it was bad enough on the first time, but when I went to go rewatch it, I'm just like, these these poor guys, their story is just, they're doomed from the minute they pop up on screen.
I know the end of their race. They're just like, they can't even talk to each other while they're stuck in there. Like, they did a good job of making these look like sad creatures. Just so sad. Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very brutal, Anna. I agree.
Yeah, that's again, because that's in like the last episode, and I was watching it last night and thinking, God, this show is so terrifying, But yeah, it's interesting because even with all the horrible stuff that the scientist does, one moment that really sticks out is when Aldra comes to the castle to um exchange herself for the Gelfling prisoners, and there's an exchange between the two of them where she's like, "You didn't have to come to this. We were friends once," and
Mhm.
he just sort of takes a breath and says, the line from the film, "Another world, another
Yeah.
time," and it
Yeah.
shows that dimension that things weren't always the same, and it just provides some depth to a character who you can just view as totally evil, and he is, he's evil. But it's just great to see those hidden depths in the characters. And
Yeah. I think another example of a Skeksis with, I don't know, a little hidden depth is I guess it's the Scroll Keeper. Yeah, it would be the Scroll Keeper. Who has, I don't know, a little moment with Brea. I don't know. He's a little intrigued if you remember that, because obviously she's a scholar and she likes to learn, and you see that he's like, oh, a little gelfling likes to read. It's like a pet. He thinks of her like a pet, but kindly. And so that was another example where you see, I don't know, a little depth to the Skeksis.
yeah, it's kind of trippy that in the first episode you get that scene where she's in the carriage, and it's almost it'll it makes you sort of let your guard down for a second, because you're like, oh, he's being nice to her, and
Mm-hmm.
there's this kind of friendship almost developing between them. But of course, we all know the Skeksis are absolutely terrible, and that
Yeah.
comes back later on in the season, where he's like, oh, the curious little gelfling, and and they're gonna attempt to drain her, and it's just, oh, it's chilling.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of where to go next. There's so much great in this show.
Yeah, we keep getting diverted because everything is fun to talk about. Every single thing.
Yeah. Any other of your characters who are particular favorite?
Um, I want to give a shout out to my favorite of the extras, of the extra puppets, which is the fancy curly haired Vaporin lady. You know the one I'm talking about. She's always got her parasail or whatever, and her little hat, and these nice like spiral curls. She's just frilly and fancy. And Vaporins are known for being a little fancier, but like she is the fanciest out of every shot.
Yeah,
I love her.
yeah, and then of course Hup sees her and he's like, "Oh, I've got an idea," and he goes
Yeah.
to steal some clothing to dress Deedon
Yes.
so they can get in.
Yeah, I was glad she came up later because from like the very first episode when we see her, I'm like, who is she? I must know her. But that is one thing that they did a great job with here in Age of Resistance is being able to really give diversity to the Gelfling, because in the movie we only see two, so they had kind of the room to do that.
Yeah, I find the entire thing with all the different clans so fascinating, and I love the matriarchal sort of society they've set up, where the leaders of each clan are the Madras, and they're females, which is really refreshing, and different. Even though our central character is a male in Rian, but he has so many powerful women backing him up, and and the fact that even though he's kind of steps into the role as hero, he's not the one always calling the shots.
Yeah. And on the subject of him being, I don't know, the main character, I
Well,
don't
he's
think
one of
of,
them.
yeah, he's one of them, which is why I want to highlight that, in as much as he's the Jon Snow, there's still Deed as the Daenerys and, I don't know, Bray as the Tyrion. You get the point, which is that there's a certain tier of those three. Those are our main characters, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Pretty equally. I think they all are featured.
yeah, he gets to,
He
you
starts
know,
things off more. I think for
he starts
sure.
things off, and he gets to wield the sword at the end. But I think the more interesting things at the end are done by the women, because
Yeah.
you got Deet, who really saves them all at
Yes.
the end. Adds great, sacrifice, because she's overcome by the darkening, and we're left to wonder where that's going to leave her moving forward in the story. And then Brea is the one who finds the crystal shard, which I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, and then they do a good job at bringing people together too,
Yeah,
at bringing the Gelfling, which is very important as well. But yeah, on the subject of matriarchs and lady Gelflings, fish rocks, people in the chat are commenting about. Of course, they have wings, so
yes,
of course they rule. Whoever has wings better be in charge. I loved that callback to that reference in the first episode where Mira is like, "Of course I won. I have wings," and because an iconic line, I even have a magnet that says it on my fridge. Is of course you don't have wings. You're a boy. Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, that's sadly, I feel like if this was taking place in the real world, it still wouldn't matter. Things are so crappy, but it's nice to know that in this story, it's like you look at the ones who have the wings, and you're like, well, clearly they're superior.
But yeah, and they also in the creation of it, you can just see that in a earth worshiping, Thra worshiping, but in a very earth based religion and society, the idea that women rule is more common too. So you can see where they got that idea. And I see Fish Rocks also mentioned big shout out to J.M. Lee for creating the Gelfling clans. And this is probably a good time, right, for me to mention the thing I might respect about the Henson Company the very most. Do you
Yeah, go
think?
ahead.
Which is that they have done fan contests basically, where they asked their fans to write fan fiction and submit it, and whoever did it would get to write the next books because they thought, hey, who's going to know the series, the movie better than a big time fan? Who's going to be the most passionate about it? A big fan. And so they had that contest, and that's how they got J.M. Lee. But they also did similar contests for fan films or creating your own puppet, where whoever won, they got to come work at the Henson Company and get jobs, or eventually they are working on Age of Resistance now. So I just think that is really admirable. I love to see properties like this that have a big fan base really tap into them and use them basically for good. I learned a bunch of this. I went to an event about the Dark Crystal before Age of Resistance premiered. It's where I got the visual history. It was a premiere for the book, and I got it signed by Alicia Henson, and it was moving to hear like her speak about how much they love their fans and just how much it means to them. And then clearly during that time period, they were working on the deal for the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, but it hadn't been announced yet. So I'm glad it worked out for them.
Making me so jealous with all these stories of meeting people and getting stuff signed. God, that just sounds so amazing. And yeah, I do really respect that they've worked to sort of make everything a cohesive whole. I think it would have been easy when they decided, oh, okay, we're going to get to do a live action series. We can scrap all that other stuff but instead they really brought it in, and I love the fact that as an adaptation, it's like the book series and the show are like companion pieces that go together, and I just absolutely love that. It's great. And the fact that J.M. Lee, who wrote the books, is also, one of the creative voices on the actual show. And I know he wrote at least one of the episodes.
Yeah, we see him. If anyone wants to actually see him, you can see him in the documentary, talking about the series a bit. Yeah, it's very nice to see that sort of thing. Definitely. Yeah. Cohesiveness. Yay. Continuity. Yay.
Yeah. And let me throw up a picture of one of the she's an original character from the movie, and she's in this as well, the wonderful Mother Agra.
Yes, Agra.
Who was performed and voiced by Frank Oz in the film.
Yeah.
And in this show, she actually is also voiced by the puppeteer.
Who I actually didn't realize that. That's great.
Nice. At least I think so. You know what? I might be talking nonsense, but I know that she's not voiced by like a sort of known celebrity. So you
do that. I'll mention Denizo Twergarian. She said, what clan does everyone feel like they relate with the most? I mean, probably Vaprans, because they are scholars and have books and whatnot. But Grottons, as Stephen Herby Dragon says, calls them underground hippies. Yeah, the Grottons got that good glowy moss, so it's between Vapran and Grotton for me.
Yeah, I don't see in her listed under voice cast, so I do think that she's just voiced by the puppeteer, which is great. Just because they went with whoever could do the best job. And
see, Donna Kimball was mentioned here. She's a puppeteer and voiced Agra, and that is her name. Donna Kimball. Cool. Shout out to her for taking on a very, very iconic role. That's the next Dark Crystal Funko I need if I get one, is Agra.
Yeah, I do have I've tracked down each of the ones that they have released for Age of Resistance.
Yeah, I know you have the glow in the dark Deet.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous of that. That is a great one.
I was a bit disappointed at first because it seemed as though I had missed on my chance to get the Target exclusive of Chamberlain. And then it was a couple months ago. I was at Target for some other reason, and I guess they had restocked him. And I was like, yes, I got the last one. But yeah, it's I don't collect a lot of Funko Pops because they can very easily just overrun your house. But
I never bought one to start off with. I was given one, and then I won one, and then I was given another one because I had two. And at that point, I was like, well, the three that I have don't really accurately represent my biggest passions. And it all went downhill from there. I was like, I can't have like a Captain Marvel and a one Game of Thrones. Like those aren't my fandoms. So yes.
Yeah, I bought, this is a side note, but like I knew that if I started buying Game of Thrones and the Lord of the Rings ones, I'd just never stop. But I did get Ned Stark and Boromir just because I'm a huge Sean Bean fan. And, self-plugged, there actually is a short little video on my channel, which I did last year after Con of Thrones, which is the two Funko Pops arguing about, which fandom has my loyalty. So But
Okay. I saw a quick correction here, which is Donald Kimball did voice Agra, but there's two puppeteer. I mean, I just looked it up. There's one that was mentioned, Kevin Clash, who did the
okay.
puppeteering, but it also sources Catherine Smee is also doing puppeteering for Agra. So, a secondary second unit.
Okay, yeah, which is why I said I may have gotten that wrong, but I just know that they had it was either a puppeteer or someone on the production who did the voice perfectly, and they went with her. So because it's like if you find the right person, no point in trying to find some named actor to
yeah.
do it.
Yeah, Agra is, I guess, back to Agra. She is definitely very, very popular. I know a bunch of my friends who like the series and other friends who are the Chamberlain quoters with and all that. But some of them are Agra quoters for sure. They're like,
Can I just say that
only Agra controls Agra?
I was just gonna say that last night I was in the Slack and I was rewatching that episode and I was like, this is probably my favorite quote of the entire show. How dare you try to control Agra? Even Agra can't control Agra.
Oh.
I love it. But yeah, she's just such a classic character. That's again going back to, even though I wasn't like in love with the film, especially growing up, but once I rediscovered the movie several years back, and you can't help but love Audra because she's just such a weird, interesting character.
Yeah, I love her groans, like that sound when she gets up and all that. Just I won't make it because it's that unpleasant and like it's a very unappealing sound, but I love it so much. Amy says Agra. That's nice. Agra is my picture on Netflix. You can choose your little thumbnail for your profile. I chose Agra.
I have deep.
Ah, very nice.
But God.
Anna mentions the moments between Agra and the Archer. It was a very good moment too, and I like moments with Agra and the Skeksis and the Mystics in general, right? Because she has such a history with them, which again, I won't get into the creation myths to spoil things more, but I mean, it. She was there from when the from when the Urskeks first came there. She was there when they split. She was there in the years after they split. So yeah, she knows them quite well, and even if she's been really tricked by them, she's not that smart, I guess. She's just trusting. I don't know.
Well, there seems like there
too
was
tempted.
There was some sort of there's a level of self-deception too. Like she was willing to be tempted by their offers.
Yeah, and she's kind of a neglectful mother of her planet and of her son. I mean, she wants knowledge. She has they offer her the ability to explore the whole universe. It's hard to just disregard. So yeah.
I do want to, I've been just so excited to talk about this that I have forgotten to stop and do the mid-roll.
Yes.
I will go ahead and do that. Next week, I'm going to have my wonderful Here Be Dragons co-hosts on, Stephen and Nessie, and we're going to be talking the 2000 Ridley Scott film Gladiator, which is a favorite of all of ours. And I still remember seeing that in the theater. I remember because I was doing martial arts at the time, and I was fitting it in right before one of my classes. So I remember I kept looking at my watch like, I hope the movie's over soon. But yeah, it's a favorite from way back. So I'm very excited about that. And They've got something really interesting coming up the week after, but I won't spoil that just yet. I'm gonna hold on to that. But yeah, and let's see. And this weekend on Sunday, I'll be on Here Be Dragons with Stephen and Nessie, and I'm assuming we have some additional guests. And I want to say Courtney Mazza will be on, but I think that's so. But Stephen would be the one to know that for sure.
One of them will tell you shortly. They're both in the chat.
We're going to be talking about The Expanse, and we're going to be doing a character profile on Bobby Draper, who is just, I love her character, even though, I've been telling them I want to do, a character profile on Miller, but they keep putting that off. So,
yeah.
but Bobby is wonderful, and I look forward to talking about her. And so, yeah, that's coming up. You have anything you want to mention, Ashaya, about what you guys are working on?
We're releasing a short half-an-hour episode on Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, launching it for patrons on Sunday, I believe. So that's about all that's new with us, besides our regularly scheduled programming. Yes. Oh, also, regarding the Dark Crystal, watch it again and again and again.
Yes.
Let it play while you leave the room. Sign the petitions, like it on Facebook, or whatever. Do whatever you want, but know that if you do any of those things, it'll make me happy. So, not that I don't know that it's viewership that will affect season 2, though. So either way, add to the numbers.
Still, it deserves to be watched as much as possible. So.
Yeah, they had like a little event, the Crystal Shard. It's a podcast, Trial by Stone. They did an event where they were like, let's get it trending. Everyone watch it today. And it didn't get there, but I still just on my computer just like opened it and let it run, and then came back and let it keep running when it auto paused. I also did that for The Expanse. Just, let it play. Let it get a few more rewatches out of me.
By the way, I feel like I should thank you for that, because you got Steven into The Expanse and he got me into it. And I've just loved the show. It's become one of my new favorite shows.
Oh, yeah. I spread that show around like I don't want to spread COVID around, basically. It just went all over the place. I can't, I've seriously had a few dozen people at this point be like, thank you for The Expanse. Or for, in your case, a degree of separation there. But I'm very happy about that, because we have a lot more years with this show and, another year or so with the books. So anyone who hasn't read the books, you have another year or so to read before the final book.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I'm just really thrilled that it's, that it got picked up and it's continuing, because it would have been so tragic if that show got cut off at season 3. But it's just getting better and better. I know I was blown away by not just the story, but the production of season 4. It was incredible. But
back to other things, I suppose.
This could divert into an Expanse.
I know, it's so easy.
We won't let it. So continue on. God, I know there was something I was about to mention before I realized that we had to take that break. Just the scope of the show and how much they're able to dive into the mythology. I was so excited by it, because I think one of the things that held me back about the original movie, because I loved all the design of everything, but I think I always felt like there wasn't enough meat on the bones for me story-wise. But there's so much world building in this, and the characters are so fully fleshed out. And I mean, it's just, I love all the stuff when things start to get really kind of dark and twisted, the stuff with the 3 sisters.
What a good plot line that is.
And you got Celadon, who, I feel is probably an easy character to dislike, for some people, but it is kind of a byproduct of how she's been raised and what she's been taught, and just when she goes dark, halfway through the season,
when she starts dressing like the Skeksis, she gets all goth for a little bit. So I'm serious, Celadon now.
And then she comes before the Skeksis, and the way she just keeps giving and giving, and the Emperor just keeps going like, no. Because at that point, they're completely unleashed, so they have no reason to, to offer any kind of olive branch or anything. So she just gets broken down bit by bit in that scene, and it's tough to watch, because even though she's, she has kind of brought this on herself to a degree, but it's just, it's still sad to see. Dawning realization.
Yeah, it's a similar thing. She's, young. She's tricked. She's been taught. She's been like indoctrinated to believe this about the Skeksis. You see other Gelfling who are also like can't imagine the idea of the Skeksis wanting to bring them harm. And, it makes me think, without getting into things, but anyone who reads Game of Thrones who knows it will think of Sansa Stark and Cersei Lannister and all that, someone who didn't quite realize at the beginning and who was kind of, not tricked, but it was bought into things.
Yeah, well, and I'm probably not going to disagree there, because I love Thra. And she's voiced by the wonderful Caitriona Balfe, who is the lead actress on Outlander, another show that I'm a huge fan of. And she gives a really great performance in this. Yeah, so Celadon is not my favorite of the sisters, but
yeah, no, I wouldn't call her my favorite of the sisters, but I think she has the most interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think. Although I will say with Thra, I'm very intrigued by if any of her mind, or if any of her is within the hive mind.
Yes,
I'm curious. I could see that being the case.
I get that impression when the beetle sort of disconnects from her and wanders off, that now a part of her is in there because they've been joined as one.
Yeah, and there's some stuff in that in the novels, but there are lots of divergences, to be clear, in the novels and the series. So I don't know if elements of it will be in the series or not. So none of this is a spoiler exactly. It's more me speculating on how they could incorporate things from the extended universe canon.
Yeah, have you seen Outlander?
No, I have not.
Okay.
To answer there, I have not. I don't know. I know Caitriona. I know her, but I don't know what all I've seen her in. Even as that happens,
yeah, I think
I know her very clearly, but I might just be I know her because Outlander is very big.
Yeah, I know that at some point I'll be doing a stream, and I know Courtney wants to do that with me, and Steven's mom is also a huge fan, and I think she wants to come on and talk about it too. So then that'll be great, because I want to break that one down season by season. And that's one of those shows that was a big surprise for me that I got into. It's actually made by Ronald D. Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica.
I just want to share a quick anecdote from Aziz, actually, which is that he went to see his grandma, right? His grandma's, I don't know, in her 70s, something like that. He went to see her, and she's talking about all her like she's talking about how she's making this dress, and he's like, "Oh, it like looks like a an old timey dress." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool." And then later that day, she's talking to him, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm making it to go see my friends." And he's like, "Okay, what are you guys doing?" And she's like, "Well, we all love watching Outlander, and so we like to all meet up and get dressed up and out in these clothes like it." And he's like, "You're basically you're having little mini conventions where you all cosplay right now, Grandma." These are your cosplay friends. So I just think that's very cute that a grandma just fell into like pretty deep Outlander fandom.
Yeah, that's. I know that it's got a pretty rabid fan base, especially among women. Although because I feel like it's disproportionate, so that's why I didn't like to wave my flag for it. But yeah, God, sorry, I keep moving this off into the directions of these other shows, but
there's things it relates to. It makes sense.
Yeah. So let me see, because we're just jumping around. I'm trying to think of some elements that I want to focus on. Characters we didn't cover. We talked a little bit about Rianne.
Yeah, we did. I saw a good question here, and now I just can't find it anymore. Oh yeah, Fish Rocks asked, "What would we like to see in season 2?" That was kind of fun to talk about for a second.
Yeah, so we'll talk about this for a second, and that kind of leads into something else I remember I wanted to speak about.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't help but be really worried that things are going to go downhill in season 2, because we know things aren't in a good place at the opening of the film. And it's actually something that really had me on the edge of my seat for this season, because I really thought that things were going to end terribly tragically at the end of this season. So when I promise I'll get back more to my hopes for season 2. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
But in the first episode, when it climaxes with Chamberlain's speech about the Gelfling and how they want to be ruled and they don't stand a chance, I remember watching that being like, you're seeing all these moments of hope as he's speaking, so you're hoping things are going to turn out okay, but just knowing that the Gelfling get wiped out eventually, you just assume that the end of the season is going to be so horribly sad, and it's not really. There's hope at the end, and then they do have a victory, but then that just leads you to question if there's a season 2, even possibly a season 3, depending on how far they carry it. Is it inevitable that things are just going to be terribly tragic in the end?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's a hope, but it's a dread.
See, my big question for season 2 and going forward has to do with Deet's vision. Where we see Brea like holding a child and running, and we see Deet on the Skeksis throne with the darkening, and that's our glimpse at the future. And you can kind of see with Brea and the child, you can see the backstory potentially for the movie, right? That potentially Brea is the mother of, it's presumably it would be Kira, but regardless that Brea had a child, and that child survived, you could say potentially, for one, I would say, and you can even see the connection with the podlings raising Kira with like the connection the Gelflings are having here. But I have a big question about that, and I think it's interesting the screenwriters, they have talked a bit about this going forward, because as was mentioned in the chat before, they have season 2 written. And so they were talking about how the visions are them saying that they know where it's going to go. They have a plan, right? But what they talk about is prophecy is mutable. And then basically they talked about the concept of the idea of accepting your place in a prophecy. I'm like, especially what if your place in a prophecy isn't very good, is in a great place, right? Because they're taught, and they say usually, especially in high fantasy, it's always accept your destiny. You're the most important person in the world. But sometimes, what if your destiny is you're not going to make it, but maybe someone you love will, or maybe more people will, and then at what cost are you willing to pay? And so, like, they're going to play a lot with the idea of, if you know the future, can you change the future? And how it's a test of their moral character too, if they're, and who they are as a character, right? If they want to hold up the prophecy, or if they think they can break through it, or if that'll make things worse and all that. And really, their interviews also made me think of, we see some Gelfling that are actually quite separate from everything, right? Yeah. Like, we see that there are some that live across deserts that people can't easily cross, and that go, seafaring. And so what I like the idea of is that Jen and Kira weren't the only two Gelfling left. It isn't as bleak as we're thinking. There could be more that just they managed to live farther away.
That's very true. That would make me happy. And then another really interesting thing about that vision is we see Rian on the crystal itself, sticking the shard, or a shard, in the crystal.
Yeah, or a shard, and whether it's actually Rian, because Jen looks a lot like Rian, and in the shots we've seen, when
I rewatched it, it looked like Rian, because I thought the same, that it could be either or, but when I rewatched it last night, I said I think it's Rian, but that could be, because also it shows him sticking a shard into the crystal, but there's not like a burst of energy that comes out when he does that. So could something could there be something wrong about when he's doing it, or
I mean, it has to happen at a certain conjunction.
Yeah. So it could just be that he does it, but he misses his opportunity, or he's doing it at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, he would have to live a lot. I mean, it would be much later in his life for him to do it at the later conjunction, for example. But they definitely have Jen look like Rian. And that's for sure on purpose, I think. Yeah, with the similar look.
Yeah. Are we back to talking Outlander? If you know the future, you change the future. Yeah, let's
I see Anna asks, who do you think is Jen's father and mother? And I think I lean towards Jen is potentially the child of Rian and Deet, if Deet survives, but it might be Rian and someone else. I do think Rian is the father of Jen. I don't know if you agree. I think there's a lot of foreshadowing there, whatever the word is. But yeah, I think things like the kind of clothes that Jen wears, he has a lot of stuff that associates him with the Stonewood clan, actually.
Yeah, I think the only thing that makes me question it is because we just don't know strictly how much time has passed between the series and the film.
Yeah.
So if it's short enough that it's by just a generation, then yeah, I think that is definitely conceivable.
Yeah, whereas I think it's likelier to me to be potentially longer than I don't think it's shorter than that. I don't think things change so extremely that quickly. But I don't know. I think there's enough time for them to have a child, like a child that grows up.
Yeah, so Fishrock says, if the writers forgo a true genocide, would that tarnish the epic nature of Jen and Kira's journey? What do you think?
I don't think it does. I think it still shows that, I mean, a genocide's a genocide. right? It doesn't matter if a small contingent survived, past the deserts, and that Jen and Kira years later will be happy about that or something like that. I don't think that ruins how tragic it is, for one. Two, it doesn't change Jen and Kira's story, right? Because they still experienced it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect their story, and it doesn't have to affect the movie, but it does give them room to play with things. I think potentially with timeline stuff and with some characters surviving, because that's part of it, is that if you want to keep surprises going, you don't want to necessarily say all of these characters are dying for sure. You want a little doubt that maybe some did survive, I think.
And this season definitely played with that because, again, like I said, I started off the season expecting that things would go horribly by the end of the season. And as a matter of fact, I'm not even sure I knew when I watched it the first time that there would be, further seasons of the show. And so it was a surprise at the end when things turned out to be more hopeful. So the way they played against your expectations like that, and and I don't know how interesting it would necessarily be to end the show with every single Gelfling character dying.
I could see, some escaping potentially. And speak in terms of the future and the visions, I do wonder if Brea were to if that's her holding a child, whether A, Brea had a child, or B, she's holding Jen potentially, or Kira, but it's someone else's child that she's running off with to hide. Because it doesn't have to be her blood. Certainly, I don't think that's. But also, I just want to point out, I just saw this this thing in the chat from Voice of Reason, which is a very relevant name. To be fair, you don't want Jen and Kira to have to repopulate the entire race, or you're going to run into genetic bottleneck problems.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Yeah, that's actually something that it's funny what you don't think about at the end of the movie. But that is going to be a problem.
Yeah, I remember. I never read it, but when before Age of Resistance came out, I did a deep dive. The sequels, because they had like a continuation set of books to the movie, like back in the 90s or whatever, and they like. Jen and Kira became like the king and queen, basically. They had a whole thing that happened, essentially. Like a pretty weird plot line, just is all I can say.
Now, weren't they going to do that as a movie?
Yeah, they had some talks about that and all that. The story's weird. I tell you, if you ever look it up, it's definitely a weird concept of an idea where they have like basically the Grunaks are inspired by these miners that like a miner that Brian Froud designed, this kind of character, and they almost used, but they never used it. And you can see it in some of the world books or the visual history books. You can see like a shot of the puppet, but they ended up using it as inspiration for the Grunaks, and then these minor things that are like deep. They're deep under the earth, and they come out. I don't know if you've read into this at all, John.
I've seen a little bit about it because I think I was looking online and I found some images from that.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. I suppose. What was it? Yeah. Anyways, maybe some other people in the chat. Oh yeah, don't tell the writers of Beneath the Dark Crystal about that. They didn't seem to mind the incest approach. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the one I was thinking of. Beneath the Dark Crystal, perhaps. No, I don't know exactly which book I was thinking of. It's not super important, but they've dealt with this problem before, essentially, of what do we do when we have two of a species?
Yeah, I do like, Anna mentions, Hup could be the reason why Kira is raised by the podlings. I would kind of love that if there was a connection there with Hup, probably just because I love his character so much, and that seems like a great direction to take him in.
Mm-hmm.
And and as far as hopes for season 2, what do you think happened at the end to the heretic and the wanderer? Because they do seem to kind of disappear at the end.
Yeah, they do. I worry for that. I really do. I don't know. I'm not sure, honestly, about. Yeah, just I feel like realistically, probably it's the pessimistic option that they're gone. But I like to think they're not. What about you?
I just love them too much. I want more of them, so I'm gonna be the optimist for now.
Good, yeah.
Especially because we don't really get any kind of farewell with the characters.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. So
they're in one scene, and then all of a sudden they're not, and so I
mean, yeah, we see the hunter. We see him come there. But yeah. I don't know if he would just go at, like, if he just has to kill them.
No, because they're there after the hunter leaves.
Yeah,
because they're tending to the archer.
So yeah, I mean, he's not gonna lope back. They're with each other, so they don't have to worry about their counterpart being killed. So yeah, I guess they're fine. It seems like they don't have a lot to do right now. But if they need to go back through the deserts, that they would see him again, right?
Yeah.
I think that's when they might run into them again, is during some characters, perhaps Exodus. I don't know. Basically, I'm kind of intrigued.
Hup is still there, yeah. So I feel there's the opportunity still to interact with the characters, provided they're okay and they.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I forgot about that. Well, then that's easy enough. But I do feel like we're gonna, in season 2, I would expect or want to see more of the Doosan, because I think we got a really big hint with Ray Keir and how flirtatious he was with Brea. You know, I don't know. I just got a vibe between them that I think will be explored going forward.
Yeah. And of course, and then I was looking at the cast list, and I'm like, of course, he's played by Theo James.
Yeah.
As kind of supposed to be like the heartthrob. Dark Crystal, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it comes across for sure. Bray is very taken with him. He's like talking about Verdant Oasis. Yeah, he's very, very flirtatious. So yeah, I think he'll come back because I mean, the Crystal Desert seems pretty useful.
Yeah, I mean, and Fishrock, talked about the Archer's sacrifice. That was such a amazing scene in the final episode. Just the way that the music kind of builds up as he steps out onto the ledge, and and then as he sacrifices himself, then Algra is reborn out of the hunter. And I haven't really talked about the score to the show yet, but the music is really powerful in that scene, and a lot of the music doesn't it's its own thing. It doesn't reference but just a couple times the original theme from the Dark Crystal, which does make its appearance in when the opening title comes up in the first episode and then at the end of the last episode. But yeah, they released 2 soundtrack albums for the series, and I happily bought them both. So, but
where is this? Oh yeah, that I did find the exact thing I was referring to, by the way, about that sequel thing. It was The Power of the Dark Crystal, and they learn. But there's this thing called they're firelings, a different kind of ling. But there are more Gelfling in it. Potentially, there was an outcast. Anyway, so there's precedent, is what I'm getting at. More Gelfling. Yeah, I would like to see. I don't know which ones I think would survive and just be out there, because I just can't picture Brea or Deed or Rhea, and I think they're all dead. I think they all have to die / will die. To be, when I'm bringing up the idea of characters surviving, I think those are 3 that will die.
Yeah, I mean, well, sadly, I feel like Deet is definitely doomed.
Yeah,
where we
Deet 100%. Yeah, Deet, no matter what, I think ultimately, but not this season. She definitely has some time. It was it looked doom-like in the end of the season, and if it doesn't get another season, it really ends on a dark note for Deet, literally a dark note. But she'll have much more of a struggle next season. It's not the end of her story. Like, I think the Skeksis throne thing would be at the end of season 2 or something.
Yeah, the thing is, there has to be another season, just from the point of view with Deet, because I wanted to see at least some resolution of her relationship with Hupp, because they're separated at the end of the season, and they're such a strong team together that I feel like I want to make sure they're reunited before things come to a bitter end.
Well, that's a good point. I learned something just now in the chat. Steven says Deet is literally named after a pesticide, which that's perfect. She's dealing with the ultimate pest of the darkening. That is funny. But no, I love Deet. I'm guessing she's your favorite Gelfling? Would she be your favorite Gelfling?
Yeah. No, I would say so.
Yeah.
I also think she's the most, probably from a standpoint of the puppets, she's the most beautifully designed and performed, I think, as well.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think she's a particularly unique one of the main characters. Like, her features really match the kind of personality they're trying to impart on the viewer too. She's just a very delicate, sweet little thing. On the subject of Deed, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just Deed has 2 dads. They don't make a single thing about it. They don't do anything about it. They don't like shove it down your throat. You're just like, oh, there's her 2 dads. There's her little brother. Cute. Yeah. Love that.
So little is made of it that it completely kind of went over my head in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't realize it until they returned to Grot, and
and they're all saved.
And they're there, and that's so wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, that's very nice. My biggest disappointment in the show, for sure, or someone asked something about what the thing we wish that had been in it. Either way, some question about that. For me, it's just that they cut down the Tavra Annika stuff, that they hinted at it so little. I mean, you could definitely tell, like I mentioned, that Tavra and Annika dated. Like, if you knew, you could get those vibes, but if you didn't know, I don't know that you would have. I don't know if anyone in the chat who chime in the chat if you could tell that Tavra was dating Annika, aka the Siphon, who
I had no idea of that. So
yeah, I mean, you can see, like, they have some weird history in it, but yeah. So there's a fun little thing for you all. I really thought that it would be in the show to some extent, but it's not exactly. I mean, it's a interclan romance, so she's not broadcasting it, so I could see Brea doesn't know. She doesn't necessarily want it spread around. They're broken up at that point.
But again, it's like that just makes me super psyched to read the books.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much to discover. And it's sad because, you know, Tavra won't be in season 2. So otherwise there would be the chance to develop that moving forward. But yeah, it's sad that we won't get that.
To be fair, we could get Annika.
Yeah,
as a character, and we can see that.
I think we will, because they've got Natalie Dormer playing her. So.
Speaking of that, like it's just a very small role, Annika and Natalie Dormer, but really impactful to me, that moment where she knocks out, God, what's his name, Kadia, when she knocks out Elder Kadia, and she's like, not anymore. It's just a very powerful moment of like a woman taking agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he gets what he deserves.
Yeah, I know. Elder Kadia was a very Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter moment there. I mean, he gets his mind is wiped clean.
Yeah. I just want to say hi in the chat to Sandry. She just showed up. And it's very Lockhart, especially at the end when he pops in with the other soldiers, and he just goes, "Hello,
hello." Yeah,
feels like such a Gilderoy Lockhart then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you know that voice, right? That was Eddie Izzard.
Yeah.
Just so many good voices that just pop up here all over the place. I'd be watching it with friends because, of course, I got many friends to watch it, and I would rewatch it with them. And I was like, "Did you know that this is Keegan-Michael Key? Did you know that this is Awkwafina?" Etc.
Which, by the way, Awkwafina, the collector, that's one heck of a character.
Ugh, what a gross character.
Yeah, Steven was mentioning to me after he watched the first episode, he's like, I really hope there isn't as much snot moving forward. And I'm thinking, don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, no, gnarly. Truly. Oh, what a great additional character that was. No, I was glad to see, a female Skeksis. But one that identifies,
are the Skeksis really male or female?
It doesn't. I don't think they are, and I think. I mean, we see that when what's his name pees, that they have like multiple holes that they pee out of, right? Like there's multiple streams when he pees. So I don't know. It's unclear to me exactly. She's referred to as a her. So I don't know.
Okay.
She is referred to as a her, and there aren't other Skeksis. Yeah, there aren't other Skeksis referred to like that. But I think that's interesting why that would have happened. And a question I have here really is what about her counterpart? I just clicked on her counterpart. And yes, Ursen is also a she. I just wanted to check that out. So her Uru counterpart is a she. And so yeah, I don't know what the reasoning is between that, but I'm glad to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see people in the chat.
Yeah, I have to say I love getting all these wonderful personalities for all the Skeksis, because I didn't have time to rewatch the movie again before the stream, but I did watch some of the early scenes, and like when you see all of them gathered around the dying emperor in the beginning of the film, there's just so much depth added to that because they're all really unique characters.
Mm-hmm. They are, and you get so much more time to really become familiar with the look of their faces, the look of their costumes in the show, in the series versus in the movie, because the rest of the Skeksis aren't focused on nearly as much. So yeah, you're right that when you go back and look at them, you really are like, you can recognize the Scroll Keeper. You know what the Scroll Keeper looks like, whereas they weren't that discernible prior to that for me. For sure, other than Chamberlain in his red, General who is big. Like, you know, those two, and Emperor who is dying. Those are the three Skeksis I really could have named for you in the movie.
And the one who's referred to in the movie as the General, but also as the Gartham Master, he's not in the series, but he is mentioned. It's mentioned that there are other Skeksis who aren't at the castle. Who are elsewhere, who, you know, they consider calling back to the castle.
Yeah, and obviously we see the Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I wish I could share this easily with people, but yeah, I guess there's not an easy way. But if anyone has ever looked and seen, or ever has the books, there's a great art of what the Skeksis looked like when they were first born. It's fantastic art. I don't know if it's easy for you to show this, John, if I put it in the chat for you. But either way, it's well worth it because they're beautiful. It's so funny. I don't know if private chat even works for you. Either way.
Yeah, let me, I should be able to,
possible.
just give me a second, I'll pull that up.
Yeah. But anyways, I was fascinated by the idea of I don't know how they age even. I think it's interesting. The Hunter has aged so much better. You know, he's kept himself in shape, basically. He can move fast. So I think that's interesting. Oh, also, the Skeksis had 3 urethra holes, not 2. I was wrong. 3 whole holes.
Okay.
I could have shared screen. My bad. I'm sorry, John. I've never used StreamYard. Do you want me to share it?
No, just give me another second, just because I have to pull up.
Yeah, I'll keep talking away.
Yeah, I have to pull up a different browser because I can't save the image through Google Chrome for some reason.
Whoops. On my part.
No, that's fine. That's a thing with this particular browser, but I can do it in Firefox.
But yeah, there are apparently 18, 19 named Skeksis, and of course a bunch of them, you know, like there's a bunch of Skeksis that just died as soon as they all split, as the Urskek split. The Skeksis got into a real big fight, and some of them died. Like, that's the first thing they did, was kill each other. Which is very fitting. Meanwhile, I mean, the Mystics look very funny too when they're young, by the way. Am I allowed to?
Okay, I've almost got it. Hold
on. But yeah, I am.
Sorry, everybody. Making you wait for me.
Let's see. I'm tempted to see if I can beat you.
Oh, I'm saving the picture right now, so I'm almost there.
Oh,
it's a race.
I did not know. Okay, Steven says which Skeksis is just the worst. I mean, you got to say Chamberlain, really, to be honest, in terms of what he does. But I really don't I don't like Gartham Master at all, as it happens.
There we go.
Oh, yes. Look, that's what the Skeksis once looked like. Isn't that crazy? The Mystics were also similarly slim, but, like, that's a real big difference.
Well, it's like, and when Augra says, you've all really let yourself go.
Yes, exactly.
See what she's talking about.
Yeah, she meant it. That, you know, they looked good once. That's when they became friends. You can see how they got somewhat tricked into this. Their beautiful wings. Look at those feet though too. I just want to point that out. Very weird. We haven't talked much about it, but Brian Froud and Wendy Froud and Toby Froud, now that he's older, just what artists! What incredible artists!
Yeah, and it's great that they, were able to take part and drive the vision forward, because you can't really imagine doing it without them.
No, that's why I was so glad that he's still around, that the Frouds are still around to do this, because it would have been a vastly inferior series. I think it would still have been quite good because the material is really, really good, but to have them there to design new creatures and stuff like that, is incredibly useful, and to give new riffs on existing species.
Yeah, Amy, it does kind of make more sense now as to why the Skeksis would be honored as rulers. Well, one thing that we didn't talk about earlier when we were talking about the heretic and the wanderer, we didn't talk in detail, the puppet show, which is the most ingenious thing in the world. I just I just love the build up to it when they're like, now we will tell you the story through that age-old art of puppetry.
And then the hands that come out. No, it's just so perfect just to see a puppet show within a puppet show, all of that, and to see them really just readily, abundantly apparent how much the creators love puppets, how much they appreciate the art of it. And it was a great way to communicate basically what we see explained to us in the movie. So if anyone hadn't seen the movie, they could really learn a lot, actually.
Yeah, and the little miniature puppets are so well done, and it's just fun to watch. And again, mentioning again the score, probably my favorite track on the soundtrack. It really builds up the excitement for Rian, Deet, and Brea watching this, and
then their opera.
I love how Hupp has long since fallen asleep by that point, and then he gets woken up in the middle of when they're all excited about something, and you can see that he's probably just like, wait, what happened? But yeah, there's a GIF online of the Wanderer, going puppetry.
Yeah,
and I use it every time. Like I bring up the Dark Crystal with Steven, and he goes on like I just can't get into the puppets, so I post that GIF.
Oh,
but
yeah, no, that's the episode that whenever I watch it with anyone, the series, I'm like, wait, tell me when you get to this, before you watch this episode, I want to watch this episode with you. They're just such a.
I don't see how that's episode 7, and like if you make it that far with any reservations, I can't see how you're not won over by that episode, because it's so crazy and zany and again, we've said it, but I can't stress enough how wonderful the characters of the heretic and the wanderer are, and their relationship, and the fact that here you have a Skeksis and a mystic who more than anything want to be rejoined.
Tell you, I cried at the scenes about them. Like, it's very sad how much they just want to be one again. It's just I don't know. It's very moving, just very, very moving. And I will say though that I discovered through Facebook group, or I don't know, somewhere. I think it was through the Facebook group I'm in, the Crystal Shard. People really like those two together. Let me tell you. Like in a we are one and we love each other kind of way, which I can't imagine ever writing or drawing Skeksis mystic fan fiction
Oh
art.
no! Don't put that image in my head.
I was just saying, like, I've learned that. I mean, it wasn't graphic, but it was still like very clear. Like, we are in love romantically and as one.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And
But no, I definitely think it's interesting that he, like he did a lot. Like he forged the dual glaive and created lore. Like the heretic in particular.
lore.
Yeah, like we
mentioned
haven't talked
lore.
about lore, but like he creates this amazing thing of lore. I'm clearly Skekra, the heretic is very powerful. Very powerful. Most
And before
powerful
Steven
Skeksis.
jumps in, no, we're not talking about Data's brother. This is a different lore. And he's pretty much made up of rocks, and he's this, wonderful Ray Harryhausen sort of inspired creation. Well, I would say that if not for the fact that, it seems like giving Brian Froud the short shrift because, like everything else, it's so, Dark Crystal. But it definitely reminds me of something from Ray Harryhausen, and it's just this creature that imprints itself onto Brea and will protect her, and at her urging protects all the others as well.
Tell you, the most frustrating thing ever for me in the whole show was when Lore and Brea and all of them get to Skekra and Ergo, right? And Skekra's like, stand down, you're done. It's like, keep him around. Like, he's a great defender, not to mention, like, he's a creation, but it's not the end of Brea needing protection at all. She immediately needs it and has to call him back up. Anyways, drives me crazy that he would be so cavalier. I mean, we get it. Even with the good Skeksis, it's hard for them to, they still don't have quite that appreciation for life, I think.
Yeah, I think it was definitely done just to kind of give heartbreak to Brea, and to show how that Lore is just creation that's he's for a certain purpose, and that's all he's considered needed for. But yeah, it is heartbreaking, and maybe they just don't want him to be stomping around.
Can't break any of that. I mean, they do have all these delicate things hanging around and all the weird chemistry drug things they've got going on. Oh.
Yeah, do you want to speak to this? Because as Stephen, we have talked about it. He does find it hard to get into the Gelflings from the standpoint of the puppets.
I mean, I definitely think the Gelflings look the weirdest out of all the other things. They're the most uncanny valley of it all, where they're actually trying to capture some of humanity, of looking like a human. So it's just wrong. It's just not right. So like, I get it, but I don't know, similarly to how I can handle an animated movie with weird looking eyes and like a head that like, there's a ton of animated movies I can watch where they're doing a semblance of humanity while still looking not real. And so I can handle it there. So I don't know if that's similar at all for Steven, if there's ever any animated things where he's like, this is creepy, that this, or not.
Yeah, and for me, I do understand it, because even for someone who came into this fully ready to accept, puppets, because I love puppets because they're practical effects, and that's what I love. And I was a huge fan of Farscape, and you have the character of Rigel, who's a puppet in that. But even so, yeah, the Gelflings especially take, for me, it took about 15 minutes for me to be watching the first episode and then kind of give myself over to them. But for me, I have more trouble with computer animation because I know it's not a physical real thing. At least with this, I know that the puppets exist in the real world, so I can accept that reality.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and honestly, the thing is, because even though you can't get as expressive with the Gelflings as maybe some of the other, puppet designs, I did find that after a certain point, you start to almost impose what your own emotions that you're imagining onto them. Like, I can read things in their eyes that maybe are part of just the way I'm engaging with the puppet and the voice performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of it is that. But
the eyes are another good example of how they use special effects and VFX to really improve a puppet's performance too, by the way.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, because they did augment the faces. It's not completely the same as it was in the original film. And it's just very subtle touches.
Mm-hmm. It's very useful. I'd say I watched the documentary after I watched the season, and I watched the documentary, and then I watched the season again. And when I watched that first episode, it was so distracting to me. All I could see was the fact that they were puppets. I was just hyper aware of it all. It was such a weird experience because it made me realize I'm so sucked into the show normally that I just forget it's puppetry. I just don't think twice about it. It's just very immersive. Yeah. I prefer puppets to animation too, at least to pretty much most 3D animation. There's been some animated films that I could say I felt were pretty impressive, but I still don't think it's as impressive as something based in puppetry.
Yeah.
Disregarding my likes or dislikes, for me, looking at what I think is just anime, I don't know. Different strokes for different folks, but there's something about puppetry. Oh, Sanrixian, y'all are hurting my feelings talking about animation and drawing.
I'm sorry.
And Steven Stark here be dragons. I prefer my puppets to be frogs who sing about rainbows being green. Oh,
Sandry, we're talking about all animation except for yours.
Yeah, except for yours. No, specifically, I am talking about. I was trying to disregard like 2D stuff, which there's a lot of stuff I really respect about it, but 3D animation is what I was really thinking about. Which there's a lot of sameness in it all.
Yeah, but in honesty, I mean, even though my preference is with real practical effects, but even with animation, it's at a certain point you just kind of accept it and go with it. I mean, I love there's 3D animation that I love. We just finished the final season of the Clone Wars, which is full CG animation, and I thought that was just beautiful, and I love that. So I definitely appreciate.
See, I can see something like that and be like, the landscapes look beautiful. Like, what artistry. And then I see the characters and it does nothing for me. I have to say, like, I see those characters, the designs, I there's just something about it that has this kind of this association. And I mean, I guess it is partially because it's taking an animation style that's from a decade ago, but it has this very dated feel to me, and that's true of Rebels and of Clone Wars. I don't know. In terms of those examples, while I can watch those shows, and there's some moments where I'm like, that is just stunning. That is beautiful. There are other times where I'm just like, this looks so bad.
Well, I know the animation style for that was based off of some God, I forget what the show was called, but it was actually an old show that used puppets. I can't remember what it's called. It's a famous thing. I don't remember. I'll probably mention it on some future Star Wars stream.
It makes me think of, by the way, we didn't mention, but it's worth mentioning because it's a Henson Company thing as well. The Storyteller. I don't know if you ever saw The Storyteller, John.
I haven't, but I know of it.
Yeah, it's on Stars these days, I believe. They have The Storyteller, then they have The Storyteller with Greek myths. Really, like, talk about stuff that really get you if you were a kid. Real messed up. I mean, some crazy, crazy dark fairy tales, but tons of puppets as well, and by the Henson Company. Give me all your puppet recommendations. You know.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up what I was talking about a second ago, but yeah, I'm not gonna be able to find it until I dig deep.
Yeah. See Bernie L mentioning things like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Rudolph. Yeah, I like claymation and I like stop motion stuff and all that very much, which is similar. Like stop motion, that's like puppetry. Like it's very similar. The idea of like you create a physical thing and you move it around, you just do it in a very different way.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is one of my absolute favorite movies.
That's so good.
And I actually, it's funny because here I go diverging again. But I saw that when I went to London in 2010, I was on like a 10-hour plane ride. And I can't sleep on airplanes. It just doesn't work. So I was pretty much watching back-to-back movies on the little screen on the back of the chair. And so that was the first time I saw that movie. And I absolutely loved it. And it was a wonderful distraction.
I had a question for you, I guess, in the series. What's your favorite like creature? Not like a sentient talking creature.
Okay.
I'll give you a second while I name mine. I love the Landstriders. I mean, I love Fizzgigs too from the original movies, but I'm just always so happy when I see the Landstriders. They look so weird, like especially knowing that they're like people in the Landstriders, making it look like that. I don't know. I love them. I guess part of it is I like their big whiskers. They've got like big bulbous eyes and these long whiskers. I don't know.
I don't know if he counts, but again, I have to say lore.
Okay.
Just because again, it goes back to the fact that it reminds me of something from Harryhausen, and I love that type of stuff.
I'll let you say it, but I still want to hear a species. I should have been more clear.
Okay.
A whole species, because he's one.
Oh.
Yeah. I'll give you another example. I like the little like roly-poly looking things.
I was gonna mention that.
Yeah, I thought they would be a highlight for sure. Sad as well. Just messed up. Oh.
You had to feel sorry for them when everything's going haywire with the carriage ride in episode 5. When
at least they got freed.
When they all rescue. And Chamberlain goes for a spin.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably one of the centerpieces for me of the season, is that scene in the carriage ride. It's a tour de force by Simon Pegg, and as well as the puppeteer for Chamberlain. Again, he's so conniving, and he has a silver tongue.
Yeah, right. Oh, seriously.
But yeah, let me see. And we didn't talk about the ascendancy, which are the spiders, which lead to the Gartham.
Yeah, the Aratham become the Gartham when they combine Grunax with Aratham, which it's fun to get that little bit of backstory and lore on how that could happen. But no, the Aratham, the ascendancy are kind of scary, but also I kind of root for them just because, screw the Skeksis. Like, I would rather have the Thra taken over by the hive mind's ascendancy than I would have it ruled by the Skeksis.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when we first see them, they are scary, but eventually we see that, you know, they find out they're being manipulated by the Skeksis too, and then they're kind of, you know, we do root for them, and then we get to the point at the end where, you know, one of them even, you know, hugs Gurjin, which is a sweet moment.
But I do have high hope. I mean, I'm optimistic about Tavra, I have to say. I think having an eye in, like, the ascendancy isn't just gone. I think having, you know, a connection to what's going on with them would make sense to me. I don't know. Curious.
Yeah, I wonder in what form they would further that, because, you know, as I said, I'm a fan of Caitriona Balfe, so it'd be interesting if they could bring her back in some capacity, but or if,
They're just gonna have her have that weird echoey voice with the rest of them, the vibrating voice, but you'll hear her in there, so you'll still get her voice. Oh, yeah.
and
I saw people in the chat ask, and I answered. I don't think you did though. What clan do you associate with, John?
ooh,
I guess which one is your favorite and which one do you think you're in? Could be two different ones.
well, you know, I feel like I feel like it would be easiest to and kind of be part of the Drotten clan, especially since I'm so indoorsy. So being underground wouldn't really bother me.
Yeah.
And there's the least amount of drama.
Yeah, I think for me probably Groton, just because I was bringing up the glowy moss and what you bring up them being inside a lot. That actually works really well for me because I'm very light sensitive, so that actually makes a lot of sense. I wanted to say Vaporin just because they've got like a library and all that, so I've intrigued by that.
They think quite a bit of themselves.
Yeah, they do, but they've got nice clothes and they keep clean. I don't know. I definitely don't want to be a Drenchin or a Doosan, or, you know. I can tell you right now, those are the two that I don't want to be. And there's a couple I'm really intrigued. That's one of the things people were asking what we would want to see out of a season 2. I'd really like to see some more of some of these clans. Like, we don't really see the Sprighton at all, you know?
Yeah. Well, and again, it's just more stuff they can develop in future seasons, and which is why we've got to get that. It can't end here.
I had to change my lights back. It changed automatically, and I didn't want to set off everyone's with my Google command.
I know there was speculation that they were going to make some kind of announcement at maybe one of the conventions this year, but of course, that's out the window.
Yeah. Very true. I know. I wish with all these, I could have expected them this year to have a pretty decent convention, you know, appearance too. Because I've been to Dragon Con and they had Dark Crystal events. I went one year and it was another thing with the Cheryl Henson, I think. Either way, a different Henson sister, you know, daughter. But I got a couple of little pins and all that. That was before the series as well. And that was before the series that they had a whole thing with the Henson company and presence at Dragon Con with a panel and all. So you got to think with it premiered, they would have had one. They would have done something.
Seen any of those elaborate Skeksis cosplays?
Yeah, I have a selfie with one with a Chamberlain. I was so happy. Oh my god. I wonder if it's even possible for me to find it. And I can screen share if I can, but it might be possible. Anyway, I did see one, and it was just so cool.
I was teasing Aaron that when I'd come to one of the cons in a Chamberlain cosplay just to scare her. Sorry, Aaron. But yeah, I'm fascinated by that because that's really elaborate.
Oh yeah,
the people who go that far in.
Hard to walk around. It's one of those costumes you have to have a handler with you for. You have to have someone to guide you. Let's see, September 6th. But yeah, I found one. I'll share it in a second. But no, I what I really want is, and I know people would hate me for it, but I want it so bad. Well, there's two things I really want. One is the idea of just getting a Skeksis head made, and put like a mask and wearing it, and then like wearing like a full suit or like something that's like very anachronistic. So you're like, what, again, it makes me think of like stupid, sexy Flanders, but like stupid, sexy Skeksis, one of those kinds of things, which that way you don't have to wear the whole like shebang or even have it made. You just kind of, do a little bit of it. But my other one I loved the idea of was getting a custom Gelfling mask made that like is your face. Like it's your face, but it's a Gelfling, and so it's wrong and like deeply disturbing.
God, if I could get that, I would totally wear that because especially I know it would unnerve Steven.
Oh wait, here is this. Share a screen. Here, I think I can now select my window. Here we go. I don't know if people can actually see it or you have to approve it or what, but either way, unclear. But people can see me with the Chamberlain.
Yeah, nothing's.
Oh, it says Ashaya says me. Maybe people see. It just says your.
No, I got it.
Oh, okay. See, there you go, everyone. There's me and a Skeksis, and then there's Chamberlain from far away. I got a kind of a blurry bad selfie because I didn't want to distract people were kind of swarming, so you can see. I just was like, I gotta get it quick. Yeah, it was fucking just so cool. Love him. I was not near him, by the way. I was across the way from the Skeksis, and Aziz or someone was like, look, it looks like a Skeksis. And I was like, what? Where? And I just like ran over to that dude and was like, it's the only time I've ever with a cosplay like barreled my way in and was like, can I get a picture with you, please? I was just, first I was so excited. It was the most excited I think I've ever been to see a cosplay.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yep. So yeah, there's my little dude. Stop. Okay.
Cool. I am definitely going to have to make it to Dragon Con one of these years. But the problem is I just can't afford so many multiple conventions. But I don't know if it happens this year. Maybe I can. If Comic Con ends up not happening.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm trying to stay pessimistic so that I can be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I'm just pretending none of my conventions are happening this year. That's what I'm believing right now. And if they end up happening, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah. I can't do that completely because I'm absolutely depending on Ice and Fire Con in October.
No,
because I've got to get together with all you guys. It's going to be so much fun. But yeah, I can totally get just not allowing yourself.
Yeah. To be fair, Ice and Fire Con of all of the ones is the safest because it's like not even, it's like under 250 people. It's a small convention. That's more reasonable, but still, I don't know. I'm scared about like just my small concerts I go to being open. And we really brought things down. Talk about the Dark Crystal. We've really darkened the stream right now. Darkening is spreading.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
my bad.
Okay, no, and there was one. I think there was one more thing I wanted to bring up, but then we got distracted with convention talk. So.
Yeah, we were talking. I asked you about what clan you'd be in.
Okay.
What else? I was just thinking about what other stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, and so would you want to be Stone in the Wood?
No, I would not want to be there. For me, I was saying Vaporin or Groton, but definitely not them, not Doosan. I would not want to be one of the warrior ones. Doesn't sound fun.
I remember what I was going to say because
cool.
Because I mentioned the Vaporins, thinking highly of themselves, and it is kind of one of the major themes of the show of all the clans, needing to come together and realize that, none of them are above the other. And that's how we get lore, because Brea has to realize that, she thinks she has to order, put all the clans in order, but it's when she realizes that they're all equal and sets that, medallion or whatever down on the rocks, and that's when Lore appears to help her.
Yeah, so really what you're saying that this is a terrible question that we're considering. They're all equal. But no, they're coloring as it happens. Just worth mentioning that's why we theorize certain things about Kira and Jen, is that Kira has very Vaporin features and Jen has pretty Stone in the Wood features. So worth mentioning that, I suppose,
Yeah, Amy, we are.
Yes.
It is kind of weird how, we're just starting to normalize to this whole situation. Again, burning down the stream. But, I mentioned how I went to work the other day and I was wearing a mask and gloves, which is such a weird thing to be thinking of. But it is what it is now. But that's why it's nice to be able to dive into TV shows and stuff like the Dark Crystal, and then come on here to talk about it. It's it's the distraction we all need. But yeah, I guess we should probably think about wrapping up. Was there anything else from the show that you wanted to highlight or mention?
Man, if anyone's still watching, they've probably seen it. But if somehow you aren't, I really got to emphasize that anyone who likes Game of Thrones, I think there's a lot you'll get out of this in terms of, it's a big cast of characters with a lot of different point of views that have to come together. There's a good extended material and lore. And lore of the creature himself. So I just want to emphasize that you should try to get past the puppets. And yeah, I guess that's it. That's my big thing I wanted to touch on, was just to emphasize that it's what I use to try to convince people is I know a lot of people that like Game of Thrones. I'm like, I tell them that it helps.
Yeah, I know that this has been, for me, my kind of successor to Game of Thrones, and as far as being invested in it, and a fantasy show. And,
yeah, some people have got The Witcher. Some people can throw themselves into The Expanse and sci-fi. For me, I want both, and so I've got for me, my two are The Expanse and Age of Resistance. Those would be my top tier fantasy and sci-fi,
which is why I want it to go on for multiple seasons, because I really want to have this for a while and to dig deep into the universe.
It's really another one of those shows, just like Expanse that they're just hurt by dropping it all at once. It's not as bad as the Expanse in terms of dropping it all at once in terms of how much it affects things, but I really think there would be more obviously more discussion, more people convinced to watch it if they just released it differently.
Yeah, well, I mean, things are kind of changing with that. I wonder if eventually if Netflix will get with it and change how they do things, and maybe by the time season 2 does come out, maybe things will have shifted and they'll do a weekly release. Because I mean, just look at something like The Mandalorian and how much discussion that generated.
Exactly. I'm like, I know it's Star Wars, but they had a week each time. Yeah, I could go on about this forever angrily, but I will say that I think it's a huge effect on these shows, and it sucks for me that the two shows I love right now are dropped at once. Although I will say The Witcher was dropped at once and it got pretty good momentum, but not like it would have if it was weekly, I don't think.
We were talking about that when we did a stream about it. It's just hard to do that because you could drag out, and more conversations and do multiple streams about the show. But as it is, we just tackled the whole show in one stream, and it's
It's there's two things that bother me about covering certain shows. One is when it's all dropped at once and you have to binge the whole thing or get spoiled to cover it. And it's just, what's the point in covering it when, everyone's just watched it? They don't need theories, all of that. And two is just when either it's all dropped at once or half of it. A lot of times journalists just get most or part of the season, and when it's for something that has a lot of theorizing, that sucks. I really have grown to hate it. Like, I'm not a huge Westworld fan, but having journalists just write an article, like they write an article weeks before that they can share 2 minutes after the episode airs. Anyways, it really, I mainly as YouTube creators, as content creators who are doing it not, in a professional level like that, it really hurts us. It really hurts us, actually. I know Kyle, who does Azor Hype, that channel, he covering Westworld. It's just rough when people get to it first.
Yeah, no, and he does great stuff, but I know we had talked previously about he can feel kind of overwhelmed by it, but yeah, I did want to mention Sanri just gave me props for my shirt.
Yay!
One of her shirts, which brings up something I was gonna ask you. Where do you get your wonderful Dark Crystal shirts?
I got this one on Redbubble. Yeah, on Redbubble, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and I have another Skeksis shirt.
Yeah, because you wore one on Steven's stream, which was on Skeksis, and I know it.
Yeah, I have that one. I got that one at a convention, actually. But no, I got this shirt on Redbubble. They have a ton. If you just sort it, by shirts, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
obviously. But no, there's so many that I want still. It's hard to choose between shirts. Yeah, there's some very good ones. I feel like you're gonna get one, and I'm very curious which one you'll get. There's some Hup shirts. They're fun. There's some very pretty Deet shirts, of course. There's a lot of very good shirts, actually, which isn't always that common. I don't know. I get a lot of shirts for things I like, and Dark Crystal has a particularly good number of, I think, well-designed shirts, and I think it's because a lot of people really appreciate the art. That's a big part of it, is the puppetry and art of it all, and so I think that contributes.
Yeah, I'd love some, so I'm definitely gonna check those out. And I also feel like because it's not something like you're not going to see Dark Crystal shirts in like mainstream stores, even where
you would see it in Hot Topic.
Oh, really?
You would see it in Hot Topic. Even before Age of Resistance, I remember going to Hot Topics and seeing them. But yeah, that's as mainstream as it gets. But yeah, point remains.
I know that because I went online and I got a something I was really excited about, which was I got a Blade Runner 2049 shirt because I love that movie, and that's nothing that's easy to come by unless you're looking on in those websites and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, Dark Crystal shirt is definitely coming up. And just closing out, Aaron, I'd love to see on a Hot Topic.
Have you been into many Hot Topics?
Yeah, I actually think I have.
Okay, cool.
It just, it's not a regular stop. But
you're just so upset about lockdown because you miss your Hot Topic visits.
Exactly.
Yeah, as it happens, we were talking about shirts, and the artist who did maybe they didn't. Anyways, there is a nice Wanderer and Heretic shirt, like them together as well. As someone else who likes it, but
I'm going to wind up getting a bunch of them. That's
my big disappointment, though, is that I have the Ergo shirt. I really wish the artist had a Skeksis shirt, had the Heretic, because I want myself to be in one and I want a friend to be in the other. Like, you got to wear them simultaneously, side by side.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was my big disappointment, is that I can't do that. But yeah, you'll definitely see this shirt, this Ergo shirt, when you go, along with a bunch of other little critters. Anyways, oh, I forgot that was that. No, that's sorry. I'm all mixed up. Yeah, the Pluffum, the paper eater. You remember the thing in Brea's library that eats the paper, the little creature? That we just didn't mention that creature, but there's a shirt with that creature on it too. That was the little choice. Yeah, that was a little cute dude.
That creature is great.
Yeah. Oh.
But God. Yeah, I just have to close out by saying, like, I love this show so much, and it's even more remarkable just by the fact that, like I've been saying, I admire the movie a lot, but I was never like an uber fan of it, and so it's been so great falling in love with this show, even though I've had the frustrating uphill battle of trying to get some of my friends to get into it, but it's all good fun, and I hope and pray that we get more of this show, even though it's great that we got 10 episodes of great storytelling with this season, and if worse came to worse and this was it would still be an amazing piece of work.
I completely agree. It wouldn't diminish the story at all for me if we didn't see it continued. Yeah,
but that said, it better be.
Yeah.
Okay, so to finish up, I will just once again mention that next week I'll be talking Gladiator with Stephen and Nessie, and so I hope you all come back for that. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in. And I mean, we pretty steadily had around 20 viewers at all times in this, which I think is a high from my stream so far, which I'm very excited about. And Ashaya, this has just been so much fun, and all the more because this is really the first time we've gotten to speak face to face.
Yeah,
out of chat, and and this was the perfect way to do it, talking about the Dark Crystal. And
yes. I thank you so much for having me, and I'm going to try one more time at saying the podling word for podling.
Okay, go ahead.
Pia Poyo Pediop Pedidia Peepop. I did it pretty well. Right?
I'm not going to make the second attempt. I
made it. I did enter between the. I segmented it basically. So I'm saying Pia, Poya. Okay, just to end on a very happy note there. How can you not smile and laugh when you try to say that word?
I do want to close out by saying that even if after, all this, if there's any of you who are still like, it's just not my thing, I don't know if I can get into it, do give the wonderful documentary on Netflix a shot, because it's a great story of how they constructed this season, and there's a lot of really talented people who worked on it, and and if you're creeped out by the puppets, there's plenty of pretty faces in the documentary. So but yeah, but I hope you guys do give the show a shot if you haven't yet. It's absolutely wonderful, and give it some time if you don't fully get into it. Like I said, if you make it to episode 7 and you're not completely won over, then you probably never will be, because that's just the joy.
Yeah, that's pretty deep to get into a show that you're like,
That's true. But yeah, so I guess that'll be it. Thank you, everybody, again, and hopefully we'll be doing another one of these in the future when season 2 comes around.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we'll say goodbye and thank you once more, Shaya, and we'll see all you guys next week.
Thank you.
Bye.